So I'll get started. Just in terms of background, about 2 to 3 years ago, the Johnson Creek Watershed Council was looking at areas along Johnson Creek that it would make sense to do stream enhancement projects that would help salmon, steelhead, coho, and mainly coho, but also Chinook salmon. And in 2020, we did a project, stream enhancement project down at the, down about a half a mile up from the confluence with the Willamette River on the main stem of Johnson Creek. And it was very successful. And we continued to look for some other locations, and the area around Leach Botanical Garden really rose to the top. And part of that was that our volunteers for about 12 years now have been doing stream surveys for salmon in the fall during spawning season, coho spawning season. And more than once, we've found reds and carcasses right around Leach Botanical Garden. The other thing that's really been interesting is that over the years, some large wood has fallen naturally into Johnson Creek. And almost every single time, what's happened within 1 year is that a gravel bar has formed just downstream of where the wood fell in the stream, which leads us to believe that there's some really positive things about this stretch of stream that could be really beneficial for helping salmon spawning in particular. So we started looking at the stream. Initially, we're thinking upstream of Leach Botanical Garden, but as we've looked at several issues, including talking to some folks who owned property there, and there were a couple people who really didn't want to see any kind of project like that done. We started to look at other areas, and we've had some good interest from some folks, many of you who live just downstream from Leach Botanical Garden. And so we wanted, at the very beginning of this project, before we really got too far, to really talk to folks, see what your thoughts were, see if you would be interested in having some stream enhancement done on your property, because at this point, no decisions have been made. We've contracted with Stillwater Sciences, and we have a couple folks from Stillwater Sciences here today, Mark and Johannes, and they'll be talking to you about some of their initial work that they've been doing to come up with some conceptual designs. But just to assure everyone, we are at the very beginning of this project. No commitments have been made. You're going to see some designs, you're going to see some aerial photographs, some maps, but nothing's set in stone today. What we're doing here today is we want to come to you, see what your ideas are, see what your interest is. When I say stream enhancement, in particular, what I am referring to is like the large wood that I had mentioned earlier that's fallen into Johnson Creek. What's been shown over several decades scientifically is that in the Pacific Northwest in particular, large wood is very key in stream to providing positive salmon. Thank you. So with that, what I'd like to do is let's go around the room, and if everyone could introduce yourselves, and if you have any, and then if you're a landowner in this stretch, please let us know. If you have other affiliations, please let us know. And then if you have any questions you'd like to make sure, or issues you'd like to make sure get answered, we can write that down and make sure that we cover that in the question and answer session. So I guess we'll start off with some of the folks that I know are on the stream. I recognize some of your names. Dale, why don't you start off and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Dan, for setting up this meeting for us, first of all. And I'm, first of all, just say I am a resident on the creek. And if you look out my window on your right, probably, maybe on your left. Anyway, there's Johnson Creek, 15 feet. I look at it every day, every morning. And I have actually 2 lots that were subdivided that are contiguous. In fact, I own property on the other side of the creek. So the creek runs through my property. An affiliation that I have is I'm also chair of Pleasant Valley Neighborhood Association. And being chair, I'm speaking with 2 different voices here. Being chair, I appreciate the work that Johnson Creek Watershed is doing for Johnson Creek because it runs through Pleasant Valley neighborhood. And we quite extensively, in fact. And so that's and I'm on. I live on Brookside.
Great. Well, thank you, Dale. Next, Barry, I know it says Carol on your name, but I know you're Barry. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Great. Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, I'm using my wife's computer. She thought it would be better than mine, which maybe that's the case, but she's got a beautiful name too. So anyway, I don't live on the creek, but I do live in Pleasant Valley neighborhood. I'm up on 118th. I'm a good friend of Dale's, and I'm also a board member for Pleasant Valley Neighborhood Association. And one of my roles with the association is to work on the natural spaces that run through Pleasant Valley. So that's my interest.
Okay, thank you, Barry. Phil Barnhart. Phil, are you there? Okay, well, we'll come back to Phil. Chad, it says. We have 2 people there.
Hi, Chad and Sarah. We live on the creek on the Foster Place side, right next to Phil. He's right over there, but I don't see him. Anyway, we're always excited to see things, ecological improvements and protections for our natural areas here, and we're just kind of, I mean, everything we've heard so far sounds good, and we're just here to learn some more.
Great. Well, thank you, Chad and Sarah. Christian Honning.
Hey, folks. I think you can hear me. Hey, Christian Honning here. I'm a ecologist with Portland Parks and Rec, and so I manage natural areas along Johnson Creek, both upstream and downstream Leach Botanical. And I've worked with Daniel and the Watershed Council on a lot of different projects, a lot of volunteer and other planting projects. So excited to see how this project shapes up. Great. But with regard to Leach, I'm kind of a consulting ecologist. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, so I tend to let them do their thing more or less, and I'm plenty busy. But anyway, good seeing everybody.
Thank you, Christian. Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Lastimirski. I'm with City of Portland, Bureau of Environmental Services. I do stream restoration for the Surface Water Restoration Design Group in Engineering Services. Been doing this for about 15 years and worked on a number of projects on Johnson Creek and throughout the city. And I'm here as a supporting role in kind of plans review.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And Phil, just thought I'd see if you're in earshot at the moment, if you would like to introduce yourself. Or if you would prefer to use the chat feature and introduce yourself that way, that's another option. Okay, well, we can come back to you later, but I'm going to turn it over to Mark and Johannes at this point.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. Hello, everyone. I'll introduce myself first, and then I'll hand it over to Mark to introduce himself as well. So my name is Johannes Phoebe. I'm a river scientist designer with Stillwater Sciences. So we were hired by the Watershed Council to work on this project, which we're very excited about. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but we think it's a really good opportunity through this stretch. So we're looking forward to hopefully working with you guys and seeing this project through. But yeah, I'll toss it over to Mark so he can introduce himself quickly.
Hey everybody, I'm Mark Snyder, restoration engineer with Stillwater Sciences, and I did a lot of assisting work on the conceptual design for Johannes. So yeah, I'll just let him talk more about that now.
All right, thanks, Mark. Yeah, so today, I really want this to be more of a discussion. So I will talk you through what we saw out there. I'll show you through the plan set, which is just an alternative at this point, where the end goal of this project here is to have a 30% design. So that's a more kind of thought out conceptual design. So what we're showing you today is our first kind of alternatives. Initially, we were going to present two alternatives, one including potential large wood structures upstream of the bridge and in the Leach Botanical Garden itself. But after being out on site, we kind of determined that there wasn't really great opportunity upstream. And we had a section about 100 feet upstream of the bridge that went into Leach Botanical Garden, but there is a kind of old boulder weir structure that really holds that area backwatered and flat. So the hydraulics through that area isn't really conducive to pool scour, as Daniel mentioned. One of the main things we can really do through this stretch to help salmon and steelhead is to really provide better spawning habitat. So with that pool scour and then the scouring of that gravel-sized material depositing downstream, forming those bars, that's where we'll see the reds and the spawning occur. That's what we really want to function at. And then those pools also function as a kind of, thermal refuge during summer when flows get low for juveniles, things like that. So they're really kind of multifunctional. So what we are doing for this project is really looking for areas through this reach that we can install large wood structures to perform that kind of pool scouring function, but also retaining gravel, spawning size gravel. So what I'd like to do to go through this, and I just jump in at any point if you have questions, and we'll have plenty of time at the end, but I really want this to be a discussion. But what I'll do is I'll kind of walk you through what we saw on site, what was kind of good, what maybe needs some attention as far as salmon steelhead habitat. And then I'll show you the alternative plan set and the kind of locations we've identified as potential areas that we could place wood. So like Daniel said, none of this is set in stone. These are just areas we identified as the probably best areas we have hydraulics that will get that pool scouring function. Doesn't mean it has to go there. So that's definitely everything we're throwing out tonight is just a drawing board, and we'd love to hear your feedback and concerns and questions as we move forward. And then from there, obviously, whenever you're putting large wood structures into a channel, there is potential for increased flood risk. As part of the regulatory permitting process, we do have to show that we have a no rise certificate, which basically means for a 100-year flood, there is a water surface elevation that's been modeled that has been through FEMA. It's regulatory. This is what they know the flooding is during that 100-year flood event. And then what we need to show is by putting wood in, we increase the roughness locally, so you will get a little slight increase in the water surface usually. So you have to offset that water surface rise with whether it's increasing a little more channel conveyance through cutting in pools, or maybe it's a slight layback of a bank, just kind of, a lot of these vertical banks we saw, you can kind of make a 2-to-1 angle, which might be better for long-term bank stability, but then it also allows for more conveyance. So you don't get that water surface increase. So you're reducing that potential flood risk that you would get by putting large wood in. And even that said, large wood being into a river can be done well enough where that risk, even with offsetting it, it's minuscule, and we'll show that to you as well. So it's not like putting large wood in is going to all of a sudden blow up houses and stuff like that. So I don't want that kind of perception to be out there. Was there a chat comment? Daniel, did you see something pop up? I just stop me, Daniel, whenever I'm talking to people. Yeah.
I sent a quick question on
Oh,
the weir itself.
yeah. Thank you, Chris. So I saw that. And please just, you can jump in that way and I'll answer questions as we go. So no, it doesn't pose a fish passage barrier. It is relatively a small weir and there are gaps in it. So I don't believe that would be a fish passage barrier. And we know they go farther upstream as well. But Daniel, jump in if you, yeah.
Yeah, Chris, I could just say the weir Johannes is talking about, this is something that was built years ago, kind of at the very downstream edge of Leach Botanical Garden, just above the bridge. It
I'll share
appears,
screen.
it
as well.
appears that it was built for aesthetic purposes, I think, to kind of form a little pool, but it's really not big enough that it poses a fish passage problem.
Yes, definitely. And I can show a picture of that too.
I assume it's holding a lot of gravels and sediment behind it as well, right?
It is, but it is because it is backwater. There is a lot more fine sediment and kind of layering on top of that gravel layer as well. So that was another reason why we kind of felt like even if we could, so for upstream of in the botanical garden, there's a couple of reasons why we didn't want to do work there. The amount of disturbance we'd have to do to the kind of recreational trail and the existing vegetation to try to get anything in there just didn't seem worth it, knowing that the hydraulics might not be the most conducive to pool scour. There was already one nice existing pool with overhead cover on one side. And then beyond that we do have concern through the reach in its entirety, but especially upstream of the weir, of fine sediment deposition. We did notice that with a lot of the gravel bars we saw forming, there what tended to be a little fine sediment veneer, which sometimes can be an issue. Sometimes that can, decrease spawning habitat, suffocating eggs, things like that. But we don't know if it's an issue, so I don't want to misspeak. But we did notice there was fine sediment throughout the reach, but especially upstream of that weir.
So, Johannes, let me just jump in. You've mentioned a few
Please.
times about pool scouring.
Yes.
One of the things that we find with large wood in streams, at least in the Pacific Northwest, is that when you have tips of logs or even root wads in the stream, what happens is that on the downstream side, the water is flowing slower than it is on the upstream side. And when gravel moves through the system, when the flow is a certain rate, it's able to move the gravel very quickly. But then when you get to the downstream side, there's much less energy, much less velocity, and the gravel settles out, which is why you see gravel bars or gravel exposed below the tips of the root wads, but also there tends to be a scouring effect immediately downstream. And so you actually are able to get a little bit of a pool forming, and then the gravel settles down at the downstream, or what we call the pool tail crest, the very edge of the pool. So one of the things that's really important for fish is that they have pools of various sizes. Of course, bigger pools are better because you have colder water at the bottom of the pool. So one of the things that we're hoping to accomplish with the wood is to have some pools. We may have to scour out a little bit of the pools with equipment when we first put it in, but the idea is that these pools will be self-maintaining, self-regulating. So that's kind of the pool tie-in.
Thank you, Daniel. Yep. Any questions on that before I move on?
Johannes.
Yeah. Hi,
Hey,
Christian.
it's Christian. Hey, I'm just wondering about this boulder weir, and is it functioning currently as a grade control structure? I did notice that on the 30% there was something regarding a grade control structure in this location. And so are you looking to kind of reconfigure these boulders, or what's the plan there? Sorry, you might have already gone over this, but
No, not at all, Christian. Daniel, can you allow sharing so I can show a picture of this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sorry.
Hold on here.
Yeah, I have some photos I can go
Yeah,
through.
go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Just share screen. Share, okay. I jump into the report because I know I have one. Let me just see down here. Yeah, so if you can see from this here, I'll zoom in. So this is looking from the bridge upstream into the Leach Garden. So you can see it's kind of like an old kind of boulder structure. It is holding grade upstream, but it's you can see it's backwatered upstream, and that's why we're getting that fine sediment deposition. But there's no real impetus for us to go in there and try to fix that grade control structure. Daniel, I'm not sure what the function of it is. We weren't sure if it was like older for the bridge. Sometimes they used to put grade control structures upstream of bridges to try to help hold the channel through the bridge. But we weren't really sure why that's there. But we don't have any intent of really touching that structure as part of this project. Okay.
And before we keep going, Phil, I see you've joined. We went around and kind of introduced ourselves, and if, said, like where we fit in. Are we one of the landowners in this reach? Some people are representing agencies here. If you would like to just introduce yourself, that would be great.
So I've been here from the beginning, but I was on my phone. So when I figured out you couldn't hear me, I went and grabbed my computer.
Okay, glad you did.
So I'm here with Lily. She wants to be a part of this too. I'm the new kid on the block. Okay, so I'm next door to Chad and Sierra. Just love it here. Love the ability to look down on that stream, and just love the fact that my neighbors are so ecologically friendly. I have a lot to learn from everybody, but I'm supportive of what's happening here. And I was going to say the only concern that I had, here's Lily, is that is this thing drawing people along the creek for whatever reason, and bringing people, basically strangers, onto the property. The traffic. I'm just hoping that that would be my only concern.
Okay, thank you for bringing that up. Phil, do you live on the north side of the creek or the south side?
I am on the, Chad, help me out here. What side am I on? I'm on the north side.
The north side.
Okay, great.
Great. All right, well, I'm going to jump back in and share screen. And so what I want to do, I just kind of walk you through what we kind of saw out there on site, and just jump in and stop me if there's anything you want to talk about. But we just kind of did a little photo annotation as part of the report. We put together the site assessment report, just kind of capturing existing conditions out there. So, upstream of the bridge, this grade control structure is definitely kind of backwatering this area, making the habitat a little more homogeneous. And then you can see, I'll zoom in on these photos, but let me know if they're showing up blurry or something. But you can see there is good gravel size spawning, but the other thing you see is how embedded this is and the old algae. So, there isn't much recurrent scouring occurring here. You might get a little bit in the peak flows. There might be enough hydraulics to go through, but then on the receding limb, when the flows start to drop, then you might start getting a lot more of this fine deposition, because the grade control structure is making this kind of really flat, slow water, so those fines can deposit more. So these were kind of the reasons why we decided it probably wasn't best to focus up here, but to focus our efforts downstream of the bridge. So with that, I'm going to go downstream. So a couple of reasons why we think there might be some really good habitat potential through here, especially for spawning. There were some areas of bank erosion occurring here, which, sometimes bank erosion can be looked at as a bad thing. It depends, right? Sometimes there's lots of fine sediment input that can cause issues with the spawning habitat. But what we're seeing here is actually, oh, that's kind of blurry. I'm sorry. There is good gravel patches. Ooh, oh my gosh, sorry. There's good gravel patches coming in from the bank, on especially the river left side. The geology is different over there, and there's like perfect spawning size gravel all along that river left side. And the thing you can see here, this is fresh bar deposited just downstream of the bridge where banks kind of eroded away. And it's clean, right? The thing you see here that you don't see upstream is there's really less fine material. There's really perfect size spawning gravels. So this is what we're talking about. If we can get this pool scour Daniel was mentioning, this is what we would hope would scour up form the bar downstream, and then it could continue to flush through time, especially as the wood structures maybe collect a little more wood, that scour changes a little bit, so you change the hydraulics through time. So this is really why we think there's some really good habitat through here. There's really good source of spawning gravels throughout this reach. A lot of the entire bed, especially in the channel margins, had really good spawning size gravel. So this is like a really good promising sign for this reach. I'm just going to keep moving downstream, but please jump in. One thing we did notice, here's a little section just downstream from the bridge. There was some small wood, just kind of roots sticking out that was creating some nice pool scour, but you can see in both of these pictures, there's a plume of fine sediment that's kind of deposited on that gravel bar. So this is one thing we're not too concerned with. Having fines in the system is kind of normal, and we should get continuous scouring. But we just want to make sure that everyone does know that there are a good amount of fines throughout this reach as well. So that is something that could limit spawning habitat potential. But overall, it's not terrible. And there were some fresh gravel bars throughout the area. Getting more wood in here, getting more scour will help with that. So again, as we move downstream, here's some localized bank erosion we witnessed, but again, it's perfect spawning size gravel. So this is our supply coming into our reach. These red circles, I'll get into this and I'll show the plan set, but red circles are kind of initial areas where we thought large wood could function. Some of these areas, this is already kind of an existing pool. I'm going to use outside bend as a loose term here. This reach is fairly straight, but outside bends tend to have the highest velocities, which would give you the best scour through these areas. So areas like this, it's really not an outside bend, but there is a really nice ROE or kind of pool, but most of the pool is limited here. Most of the pools are about 1.5 to 2 foot deep. So they're really not really big scour pools. So getting bigger scour pools will also be a benefit. So these are areas that we kind of identified in the upper. I'm moving my way from upstream to downstream, and we have the stations called out that match the plan set. So we can kind of look at that again later. But these are areas that we've identified that we could trap more spawning gravels and really get that pool scour that we're looking for.
Hey,
So again,
Johannes,
yes, please,
I
Daniel.
just want to
Yeah.
jump in. We have a comment in the chat.
Oh, yes, please.
Actually, I have 2 comments. The first one, Chris says, projects that I work on with wood structures don't attract public. The structures are in stream and hard to access typically, especially in a non-public access area. I think that's a good thing to think about here. Once you get below the bridge and the city of Portland property that's abuts the bridge, the rest of that for probably 1/4 mile is all private property. So hopefully we wouldn't have people walking down there. I'm just curious, for those of you who live in that reach, are you currently having some issues with people walking down on the stream by your property?
I'd say, in the summertime, the water's really low, and the only people we see playing in the water or walking down there are people who live right here or in adjacent properties. Never see really any just kind of random strangers going through.
I may jump in a little bit. I live right on the creek and have a good visual of the spot that you just showed, and there are random times when we'll get a homeless coming down and washing, taking a dip, particularly when it was warm last year or 2 years ago. Got terribly warm. They were in cooling off, and but basically it's not. They don't stick around, and there's no place to camp because of the shoreline. But it's just a matter of people wanting to come in and cool off, and that brings up this question: if we have more deeper pools, that may be more attractive to that word spreading and people coming in and actually they can access it from the parking lot at Leach, the lower parking lot at Leach. They can access Johnson Creek pretty easily, and it might be a thing of maybe putting up some sort of a fence around the parking lot to keep people from moving down the bank area, which is a gentle slope off that lower parking lot.
Okay, thanks for mentioning that. The pools we're talking about that would be forming downstreams of the tips. These are not going to be particularly good pools, which would be the kind of the geometry big enough for people to like dive into. I'm guessing from what I know of that size stream and from some of the pools we did on this other project that, you're probably not going to get pools that are more than 2 feet deep. So that kind of thing, maybe 2.5 feet deep.
Yeah, that sounds doable. Along in September when the water's running pretty low.
Sure.
It is pretty shallow, and that the water where you were just pointing to on the north side, it might get to be about 2 feet deep.
Okay.
And that kind of matches the existing kind of pool depths we saw when we were out there. Mark, flows were, I think it was like 85 CFS. So it wasn't the lowest low flow conditions, but flows were still relatively low, and pool depths were 1.5 to 2 feet. Even there's kind of one example of good wood that was in there towards the downstream end. And even that pool was like knee deep. So I don't expect crazy scour, crazy deep pools out here. I think sustainable, maybe we could increase it a foot at most, but even then it's like Daniel was saying, the scour is usually right around that root wad. And so you'd have to like crawl inside the wood or right around it. It's not like this big, nice open pool to go dip in.
Good.
So it's a little bit different.
Yeah. Sure.
We can make the biggest pool upstream on the Portland property, and we can put advertise now, so we can keep people up there. Now, but yeah, great question. So thank you for that, Chris. And then there's sorry, Daniel.
Yeah, there's another question. Christian asks, is there buried WPA wall in this section? So just to explain the acronym, WPA, Works Progress Administration. This was a big project with disastrous ecological consequences for Johnson Creek that was done in the 1930s, where back then engineers were thinking that the best thing for a creek is to line it, make it like a concrete arroyo, get the water out as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, it destroys habitat. Johnson Creek, this happened in Johnson Creek for many miles. There's still a lot of sections of WPA wall. In this general vicinity, there's definitely still WPA wall. I don't know off the top of my head how much that you saw in this stretch, Johannes, when you were,
Yeah.
Did you see much?
I know. So I was aware that it was supposed to be all the way through here, but we didn't see anything that was exposed. Doesn't mean it's not there, but we didn't see it below the bridge. We didn't see any.
So that might be a question for us to kind of throw back out to the folks who live in that section. I suppose you probably all know what what we're talking about here. They're these, they sort of look like paving stones. They're maybe about, 18 inches wide by 12 inches tall, and they're kind of interlocking. Do you know, is there any in that section?
We don't have any in our section, and my son and I have walked up and down to the bridge basically, and I haven't seen any.
No, I don't recognize any. Now down below, before you get to the pooling of the Brookside water floodplain, there's some work down in there that still exists, I believe, with that kind of stonework, but not up here near the bridge. And that pool that you see just upstream from the bridge, I think the historical perspective and notion of that was from the Leaches when they built that stone cabin to make a little wash pool there for them to bathe in.
See, that was my guess. Actually, we talked about this in the field. I was like, but that house is right there.
Yes.
It looks similar, like it makes sense, but
that's exactly what was going on there.
Okay. That's really great. Thank you for telling us that. Okay, I'm going to keep moving, but thank you guys. Just keep popping in questions. This is great. And then I will get to the plan set soon. I'm not going to go too much into depth here. But so, I mean, these are, and you might recognize some of your properties, but these are all areas where we saw really better outside bends, quote unquote, you know, like higher velocity areas that we feel like we could, two things, get that pool scour, but then also, you know, like the big thing we know is there's ivy everywhere through this reach, you know, so, you know, if we were to disturb part of this bank to get wood in there, we could come back and get maybe some better woody species in there, native species that could also help with long-term bank stability. So there's other kind of thoughts we're putting in here too, of trying to keep what's good, like not messing with mature trees, trying to work on areas where we saw disturbed banks, areas where we saw maybe invasive species on the bank. So things like that. We're trying to really, we don't want to come in here and rip stuff up for no reason. We want to work with the areas we can. And so when I get into the large wood structure itself, they're going to be varying looking, but there's going to be quite a bit of field fitting of how these look based on, you know, how we don't want to mess with trees and things like that. So just keeping that in mind, we're really approaching this from a less is more approach. We don't want to create too much havoc through here. So these red circles, you know, these are just areas maybe in between the trees. This is an area we can get some wood in here. There's already some big boulders that are put here for toe protection. Some of them are falling in and causing a little more erosion. So maybe this is something we can go in here and get a wood structure in and repurpose those boulders to help protect this bank a little bit better. So we're trying to identify areas like that. And it is kind of a little more of an outside bend through here. And then as we scroll down, this
Can
is,
I
you know, this, oh, please. Yeah.
Are you, I happen to know, we have a lot of down trees in the creek already. Are you
Yes.
planning on bringing something in, or, I mean, Phil's got a couple.
Okay, well, good. We're going to get to those with those two trees that fell in. So we would be importing wood for this project. We wouldn't be using stuff on site. There wasn't, like, from what we saw, there's a few pieces of wood in there, but I think we could repurpose those pieces if they wanted us to and make them more stable. We did identify, I assume we're talking about the same thing. I'll get down to that photo and you can tell me if we're talking about the same area in a second. Yeah. So again, just this is kind of a little bit of like a reference. It's small wood, and this is loose actually, but if you can kind of envision through time, what we want to get with these wood structures is kind of woody roughness that goes high enough up so at the higher flows it's creating that disturbance and creating that scour, and then at low flows it's overhead cover, it's creating velocity zones, you know, as well. We basically get slower velocities behind the wood so fish can hang out. So we're getting this what we call habitat diversity. So this is kind of like an example of what we would hope the wood would look like. It would be a little bit bigger than this wood here, but we would hope down the road this is kind of what it would look like in the end. Again, another bank on that we do know there's sewer lines back here, so this might not be possible, but this is another bank. It's kind of vertical. There's ivy. There's not many big trees around, so maybe we can tuck stuff in. So this is another opportunity through here. And I'll show you those all on the plan set of where these locations are exactly with the property lines and all that. So we can talk about that more. But again, no mature trees, some bank erosion occurring. The thalweg, which is the deepest part of the channel or the highest velocities, that's up along the side over here. So we can have wood stick out and get pool scour. So here's those two trees. Is this what you were talking about? Is it Sarah or Sierra?
Sarah. It's just
Sarah, sorry.
like Sierra.
Okay. And so were these were the two trees we saw that fell in.
That's the north side.
Yeah.
I think that's Phil's
Okay.
tree there. He chopped one of them up at least, but
yeah, we saw half of the upper part of one of the root wads was removed. So Phil, do you have, what's your plan there?
So I haven't touched that tree.
Okay.
The river basically, I did notice, or somebody pointed out that somebody had a chainsaw out there. And then the next thing I knew, the river or whatever had swung that thing to where it's pointed downstream. It was going straight across the channel there.
It may have cut some of that too. The guy who lives across the creek from you, Phil.
Okay, yeah.
that tree almost hit his house when it fell. It fell like over a year ago.
Oh, I didn't realize it's that long. But that's
Yeah, so I mean, there are a few precarious trees in there too, when you're going through that are kind of pretty close. But generally speaking, again, this is another area, Phil, if you're open to it, this is somewhere we can talk about where maybe we can repurpose these. And there is bank erosion occurring. Maybe we can try to work with restabilizing the bank, leaving the big mature trees, but getting something in here that we could repurpose some of this wood and go from there. So these are areas we're identifying. But yes, this tree creating really nice pool scour, and there's some gravel depositing below it. So there is some good things happening. So we're really looking at these as a analogy for what we could see out here potentially. Okay, so I'll just keep moving. I want to make sure we have enough time to get into the plan set and talk about stuff. Oh, this is just kind of interesting side note. I don't know how many were you out there. I think, was it 2016 or 15 was the largest flow event through Johnson Creek. This is a debris line that's about 9 feet high. And when we got into our model, we have a 1D hydraulic model through here, we could see that flow event probably was what distributed some of the debris that's this tall in the channel. So it's just another good line of evidence of when we're modeling things, are we seeing accurate flow depths in what we're seeing? So it's just kind of interesting. I'm not sure if you guys noticed that out there. Scrolling down. Okay, so is this, Phil, is this your property too, or is this down?
So that's ours. That's
That's yours. I love your property, first off. Okay, but second off, I know these stairs going down, you must use this area a lot. So we're trying to be cognizant of that. But we did notice an area, you know, so two things, tires, they're kind of now showing that tires are leaching a chemical that's actually harming salmon and steelhead now. So if you're open to it, we can get into specifics later. Maybe we could get a large wood structure in here while still maintaining your path and your trail that comes down, but maybe we could actually get you a rock trail or something instead of the tires to replace it.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. Yeah. So just, we can talk specifics later, but just, we found an area down here that we were kind of thinking could be actually really good.
That is one of those areas that I'm noticing is washing away more and more since we removed the ivy. And there's one just east of this picture too, that also, it's the undercut.
We did see stakes out there. So it looked like you were trying to, when were those stakes put in? Were they willow stakes?
Yeah, we've, for the past, well, since summer of 2020, really, we've been doing that grant with the East Multnomah Soil and Water District. And we've been having just a dismal time trying to get any regrowth down there. It's just so dry in the summers.
Yeah. All of those stakes sprouted and then immediately died in the summer heat.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, because that's good to know for us, because a lot of times with our wood structures, we like to get cuttings in there because we do really want to create that stability and that upper roughness through time with willows and other things growing back. So we'll pick your brain a little bit.
And there's willows all along there that were alive for about 8 months.
So was it a drought period? Because I know it's been dry for a while.
Yeah, last summer in the heat at the end of the summer, and before,
This is the second attempt that's now.
Yeah, we've tried planting 2 seasons, and it got even to the point where last season I was putting some sprinklers in and trying to sprinkle the forest.
Yeah, and still nothing. Okay. Well, that's.
You know, we've also got deer, so.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, this is great. Thank you. We're definitely going to pick your brain more about that, but I'm just going to keep moving for time. But I really appreciate that. It's really great insight. So just another area, again, bank erosion, you know, we're really trying to identify areas in between trees that has the potential for that pool scour. And then this is just downstream. This was downstream of the Project Reach, but this was really kind of a cool area. You know, there was really down trees, really good pool scour through here. So this is just kind of an area naturally of what you'd see with wood recruitment through this section. So we just wanted to really go down. We saw it from a distance and we were like, we got to go down there and look, you know, just to kind of get an idea of what this wood is doing in the channel. So this is just downstream.
Have all fallen in the last 2 years. It's just the bank was eroding enough, I think, that it just sort of started a domino.
Yes. Yep. Once the trees can fall in, you get that scour around it. So that's not surprising. Okay. So from here, if there's any other questions now, we can take any. Otherwise, I was going to jump into the plan set and we can kind of take an aerial view of the reach.
So I did have a question.
Yeah.
Sarah, maybe you're the one to answer this. Just looking at these photos now where the wood has fallen in, you said in the last couple of years. Whose property is this on? I think it might be good for
Yeah,
us to
it's
reach out.
It's just the one that's directly east of us. The women who own that house are named Sarah Fisher and gosh, Lou, I can't remember her last name. But they are in the process of doing that EM whatever grant,
The CLIP grant.
like the CLIP grant.
Okay,
And so they've currently got a bunch of live willow stakes down there that
Oh.
we're hoping won't die in the end of the summer.
okay. Yeah, I think that would just be helpful. You know, one thing that we've run into, at least in the 8 years I've been on this job, and this was probably a quarter mile upstream from you, that some wood had fallen in the stream and was creating some great habitat. But I think some people think that wood in the stream is bad. And I think they're worried about flooding and that kind of thing. And someone was about to go in and cut it up with a chainsaw. And we were able to talk with them first, and the tree ended up not being cut. But I think it could be helpful. Maybe at some point we might want to just talk to these folks and tell them about what a benefit it is to have this wood in the channel.
Yeah, I think they'd be very open to that. They're pretty crunchy too.
Okay.
Yeah, Daniel, this was beautiful. Like we were looking down there and we had to go down there. Even beyond this point, I think it looks like there's more wood too. So definitely whatever you could do to keep it that way would be great.
And things, of course, are changing and washing away. There was a couple around the bend that washed away in this last rain.
Good to know. Thank you. And we'll definitely at some point we'll want, as design progresses, we'd love to like sit down with you guys more and just, you're on the river all the time. You know this area better than we do. So we love those kind of just anecdotal stories you have. So through the design process, we're going to keep coming back to you guys and asking you because it's really invaluable information. Well, before I jump into the plan set, just in case people aren't sure, I just wanted to kind of like show some examples of what do these wood structures look like, you know, what can they look like? So, I mean, larger rivers, Deschutes River, right? You know, you scale the wood up to the size of the river you're working on. So I just want to spend 2 minutes here to show you some examples of what we're talking about. I'm just going to minimize your faces so I can see. So yeah, Deschutes River, bar apex jams, giant wood. They have to scale it up to get the geomorphic function you want out of it. These are river systems in Northern California, just dropping wood off of banks, steep banks with, like Daniel was saying, the tips in. You can see how there really is creating some pool scour around here. There's a nice pool right through here, gravel bar downstream. So this is a little more like what we're seeing through your area. These pictures are out in Colorado, actually, smaller streams again, more of pool structures, different kind of formations you can do. This is right after construction. So we really try to get that woody vegetation roughness. Some of these are transplants and stakes. Some of these are just bigger trees that were invasive that we put into the structure that aren't going to live, but they provide that higher roughness that you need. Because having the root wads just down low, I'll show you a detail later, you can get scour up above them. So you really need this kind of branchy material up high so it slows velocities near the bank. And that's what really protects the structure and the bank through time. So these are just a couple examples, a couple more, you know, other ones tied in. These ones were bolted together. This isn't what we're looking to do, but these are kind of different system. Again, you can see the little bit of pool scour around it, some gravel depositing downstream. Pool scour. So these are just kind of different examples of wood structures, bigger wood structure out here, Colorado River, kind of like 30-piece big giant log jam. For here, we're looking at, you know, 3 pieces. Maybe if we think we could benefit from more, maybe be 4 or 5, but we're really looking at smaller individual wood structures through this section. Again, just as a more close-ups of some wood and the pool scour you get from them. So then these, we actually looked at some previous work that Johnson Creek Watershed Council had done with other consultants, just so we can look at what has been done previously, how are they functioning, what are we seeing? So these are in Johnson Creek itself, farther downstream. Wolf Water Resources did the design on these, and they're really nice structures. they're very similar to how we would design our structures. The reality with wood is there's only so much you can do. So they end up kind of looking pretty similar. But the idea is nice here. And the thing I wanted to point out on these structures, the wood recruitment. So you can see these two pieces here are actually balanced on top from the recent storm event. So these were just taken in April, these pictures. But you can see these have been here. Daniel, these were built in 2020, correct?
Yes.
Yes, so 2020, so these are 2-3 years old, but you can see it's just a few root wads, some beams to kind of help hold them down. They're dug back into the bank, and you use what we call ballast. So the soil, the native alluvium, is basically what's keeping these stable. These are designed to a 100-year flood event. So we take that 100-year hydraulics, the velocities, the water depth, and we make sure that these are dug in far enough to make them stable so they won't float away or get swung down through moment arm. So we really do design calcs on these to make sure they're stable through the 100-year design event. And part of that is, let me show this too. So this is another structure they did down there. You can see it's not sticking out very far. And there's probably a couple reasons for this. Ideally, we found with wood structures, it'd be great to have these halfway across the channel, a third of the way across the channel. However, you got to take into consideration infrastructure around you if it's going to cause any issues across the bank, or also with our permitting process, we have to get what's called a floodplain development permit. So we can't show impact to the 100-year water surface. We can't show that water surface increasing. So the farther out you stick the wood, the higher that flood impact is going to be. So, you know, part of the reason why these might be tied up, and we might have to do this in Johnson Creek too, we might only be able to stick some of these structures out 5 feet from the bank, but we will get that pool scour. We will still get the benefits, but generally speaking, the farther out, the better. But we are stuck with regulatory permitting through here. But this is another example of just a 3-piece structure that was put in on Johnson Creek. I just wanted to show you those. Any questions on the wood structure, kind of what they're going to look like or anything before I jump into the plan set?
Oh, well, I do have one quick comment.
Yes.
You know, a
Yeah,
great
please.
example for any neighbor to see what might look good on a scale like this is just to go up to Deerdorf Road. And BES has just completed a big project there. And you can see really wonderful logs placed in the banks, and see how that works. They've also put in willow stakes last year. In addition, they did remove a lot of the work progress stones out of there and are saving them for other projects at some point. But that's a really good place to take a look at it. And you can stop right next to the Cedar Bridge and just peek down there. The property that was owned by the city is now, I understand, sold. So we will have eyes on the stream from that little house that's right there.
Yeah, I was the design manager for that project, and we had a consultant, OTAC, that was that designed that. Really great project.
I thought it was really good work.
Great, thank you for that. I see 2 new messages. Are those old ones? Yep, those are okay. So I will move on. So I will
just
jump.
say, Johannes, yeah, Christian had mentioned in response to the discussion about the willows that about the timing and making sure you're getting it in so the roots have a little bit of chance to grow. Yeah.
Just, you know, as our experience, again, we planted ours, they planted ours in the like October, November zone, and then they died the next August.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, difficult location.
I mean, I would, if I can get roots on a plant, I'm going to plant roots.
Yeah.
Especially in a difficult location. I mean, just for my own, when I'm doing restoration work around my parks and natural areas, live stakes are great in the right applications, but they're kind of hit or miss, like you're seeing. And when they hit, they're amazing. And you know, you get a lot of vegetative growth really fast. You get some big, nice, robust plants for very cheap. It's a good project for volunteers and even for contractors. But at the same time, when they don't take, you're kind of left like, oh, well, it looked great for like 6 months. Everything was leafed out. I mean, it put on like feet of growth, and then in mass, it all just goes bloop and just dies
Yep.
out. And it's just frustrating to see year after year. So I feel you. Yeah.
Yeah, it has been a rough couple of years with the heat waves.
I have a question.
Just
Uh,
one thing to that, I'm sorry, just, I agree, Christian. Usually we try to do diversity of solutions. So we try to do deep rooted containerized stock plus stakes or transplants, you know, just because you never know. And it definitely adaptive management, right? Like you got to come back and keep looking and see what's working or not. So yeah, it's definitely, it can be tough depending on the growing conditions for sure.
Okay,
Sorry.
just a time check here. We're
Oh.
at 6:30. We had promised everyone a meeting till 7, so I think we probably need to move into the conceptual design.
I will do that in 30 seconds. I'll get through it. No, okay, so let me share screen one more time. I'll just show you this was the kind of initial just detail we're showing just to give you an idea. But like I mentioned before, a lot of these are going to be tweaked based on the exact bank we want to put it in, based on existing tree roots, all that stuff. So a lot of this, the general idea, this is an overhead view. So this is a plan view. This is a cross-section view. So what you're really trying to do is you're trying to get the entire log with the root wad sticking out. So you have that more surface areas to get more scour. All of the bank material is, so you would have to dig a hole in, you place these in, and then this depth of soil ballast will hopefully act as enough ballast to hold these stable up to the 100-year. You also can put other little smaller wood piles that we put over top that are kind of angled, and that can be additional ballast on top if needed. But the idea here is you really want to get your roughness height up even higher. So the one thing we should add on to this detail too, all this branching material, we would have planting stakes all along this bank here, other dead material. So you're really just getting this roughness up the bank up to a height, so you get the near bank velocities are slow, so you don't get scour on the backside of the structures, and you really are promoting your highest velocities right off the tip of this root wad. So this is kind of just a little detail of what it would look like. So you dig in the bank, put these in, have them stick out as far as you can based on floodplain permitting, and then add roughness and other branching material to really seal up between the root wads, so they really act as like a block of roughness, if you will. And then I will jump up. So this is kind of this, and we can share all this with people as well. But this is an overview page. Let me just zoom in here. Sorry, a little bit so you can see a little better. So this is an overview page. I'll go into the zoom ins after this. But here we have the 122nd Avenue Bridge up here. This is in the Leach Botanical Garden, so you can kind of see your address, your property lines are all in here. And then these are the kind of locations we are identifying as some of the best areas to minimize disturbance to the existing vegetation, maximizing the hydraulics, and really just also skipping the sewer line, trying to avoid it as much as possible. So we do have this SS line that goes through here as well. So I'm going to jump up. We're going to be moving from, let's see here. So this is going to be from the downstream end. So Chad and Sarah, this is down on your property where that path comes in. So this is, you know, just trying to work within all these existing trees. We might be able to put some off the bank that are just kind of tied into existing trees that are also tied into ones that are dug into the bank. But this is kind of the structure down here. We know this is just past the boundary, so we're not sure if this property owner would be okay with it. But there was that eroding bank we showed here that would be a good opportunity. I have pictures of each bank and the cross section coming up, but this is just a plan view. These were existing gravel bars we noticed already. Moving upstream, Phil, this is the down trees on your property. So we did think about, it is a steep bank, but there is a little flatter area that we could incorporate some wood into, and maybe we can tie it into these wood pieces here already. And then if I'm going too fast, stop me. And if I'm passing your property and you want to ask a question, just jump in. But again, sometimes having offset structures on each side, if you put them right across from each other, you do increase risk of actually creating channel spanning blockages, which is what we wouldn't want to do in here. So having offset structures, though, you end up narrowing the channel and you get a higher velocity zone through the structures. And so you would expect to see pool scour all through this area. So it's another way to kind of narrow the channel up in some of these wider areas and really get jet scour through the wood structures. Moving up. So again, if you want to talk about your property exactly, just stop me. But this is the area where we did have the existing boulder wall. That some of the boulders are falling in. So that's the structure we were looking at for here. And these are just kind of, right now, look at these as just very alternative conceptual structures. Once we get the final locations determined, then we will finalize the design in each location. Moving upstream, this is the two at the top end. So the bridge is just up here and the Portland property is just up here. So we'd have, again, offsetting ones through here if we can. Outside, quote unquote, outside bends. There's not really an outside bend, but there is a little bit of pool scour occurring here. And then up on Portland property, we did have one up here as well, but the sewer line is basically crossing through here. So we'd have to do a little more investigation on where that sewer line is on this side. You can kind of see it going down through the channel and through this bank. So depending on depth, and we'd obviously have to talk to the city of Portland and figure out, if there's possibilities of working around the sewer line. But we feel like we can at least get one on this side. There's some nice lower floodplain benches connected here. So there's really good opportunity to get a couple in here if we can work around the sewer line. And then upstream, like we mentioned before, we're not really proposing anything along this stretch right now.
And
then, oh yeah, please.
Just want
Yes.
to jump in. I want to ask this question because Chris from the city of Portland is on this call.
Yes.
Good opportunity to pick your brain, Chris. When you did that project at the covered bridge recently, I'm pretty sure that there were some sewer issues there. How did you resolve those questions about how close you could get to the sewer line, or could you put structures over sewer line because it was deep enough that it wouldn't make a difference? Or how did that kind of get resolved in your project?
The sewer pipe was like about 11 feet deep. We did have to raise one of the manholes up to get it above the ordinary high, and we had to put a sealed a manhole on it. We did want to keep the large wood from being over top of the kind of like the easement through the sewer in case we needed to get in there and do some repairs. We weren't, tearing up the large wood structures to do that. So there was that kind of buffer. So I would imagine there's a maintenance group that can provide guidance on the different sections. But this is a pretty it's like a they call it a trunk line. So all the smaller sewers feed into this main trunk, and then that heads down to the treatment plant. So it's kind of like an arterial in a sense. So they do kind of, yeah, it's fairly important. It's unfortunate that, back in the day, they put all these sewers down the middle of the creeks. Whoever had that bright idea, that was not a good solution, but we have these and we have to deal with them now. But yeah, we try to maintain a little bit of buffer. So I guess it depends on the situation.
Thank you, Chris. Um,
While we're on that subject, just on that what is it, west of the bridge to the south, is that like a boulder wall, or is that WPA there by kind of the parking lot?
Maybe I can jump in here.
Yeah.
When they were building that bridge, on the north side, when they were doing testing of what they were working with for the abutments of the bridge, the north side, they went down, I believe, 90 feet, and it was Missoula flood small pebbles. They thought on the south side, it was going to be some of the same. When they took the sample, they didn't take it in the right place. And they thought they had the same kind of formation of underneath the soil. And they ran in, and when they started putting in the abutments, they found that, whoops, we're into boulder here. And they found that on the south side of Johnson Creek in this area, including my property, these boulders are left over from the volcano that rolled down. And so those are all, I don't think WPA stuck these boulders in. They're natural boulders on the south side. And that's why this creek watershed comes down through this area, is because all of the small gravel was washed away and left room for the creek. But on the south side is where the boulders were. And that being said, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 100-foot cedar and noble fir, noble pine, and fir trees about between 2 and 4 feet in diameter that are rooted on that bank. And it's slowly, the bank is deteriorating, and they're exposing the roots of those trees. But the only thing that's keeping them there are the boulders. And so my question, we could talk about what kind of mitigation could happen to keep that protected, because once that goes, then we're going to lose a lot of canopy on that stream, at least on the south side, and that's where the sun comes in.
We have a couple on the north side of ours that look like they could go pretty soon, kind of like the property just east of or just west of us, where a bunch of them kind of came down.
And can I ask you one quick? And Dale, you're absolutely correct on the geology there. And let me just ask one question. That flow event in, I want to say 2016, the peak flow event, it was the largest on record that I saw. Did you see a lot of this bank erosion before then, or was this, for those of you who have been there since then, or was it since that event that you've kind of noticed that?
I think it's been since, but it had been, there had been a number of high level. There's a 50-year flood that was like 10 feet at the Sycamore station, 10 or 11 feet. But the 16 event, I think it was it may have been 14, 15 foot.
Yeah. Yep. That was the largest on record. Okay. Yeah. I was just trying to get an idea of, like, urbanized area, lack of sediment, more flashy flows. Bank erosion is probably an issue, but I just wanted to get an idea of, was it always an issue? Was it the big flood event that scoured some things, and then it's been worse since? So it's good for us to understand that. So any other questions on that? On the public property? Okay. I mean, I can keep going back in the plan set. I just had some cross sections and the banks that we talked about, so I can show those and see if anyone has any actual questions. So let me get back to sharing. This has been great. Yeah, please.
That may or may not impact anything, but that under the 122nd Ave bridge, Leach claims that people aren't supposed to go in the creek there, but I know that kids run down there and play and stuff. I don't know if there's anything about what you're doing that could help to discourage that.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Daniel, is that, I mean, this project's more focused on the salmon, steelhead habitat, so I don't know if there's anything about public access, you know, upstream, downstream of the bridge, trying to sway that.
Yeah, I was just thinking if you're doing stuff there, that might be a secondary kind of goal.
Well, we certainly have contacted and been working with the folks who manage the garden, the nonprofit Friends of Leach Garden. I think it's worth continuing that discussion. For those of you who know the garden, you'll probably know that the upstream side of the garden, they've had a lot of trespass issues with kids kind of playing around and ripping up vegetation and doing that kind of thing. And they currently have a grant application in that will help to build a fence around that part of the garden. So I know that access is definitely an issue that's on their radar, but this is something that we could talk to them about and just see if, you know, this project that we're doing, there may be an opportunity to work with them on this issue.
I will share screen again. So there is a couple of things I wanted to show you guys. I mean, we have some outputs from models that we can get into if we want to, but just generally speaking, what we're seeing with our first kind of cut at the hydraulic, the 1D model for no rise. So again, show that we're not creating a rise in the 100-year water surface. Right now, we tried 4 different scenarios. So we kind of have wood sticking out 10 feet, wood sticking out 5 feet. We have a kind of cut pool that you can kind of see in here to try to bring down some of that water surface to offset it. And so we kind of ran 4 different scenarios. And right now, depending on the cross section, we're seeing anywhere from like 0.01 feet, so like less than 1/4 of an inch of rise, up to I think it was 0.13, so about 2 inches of rise in the 100-year water surface, which is minuscule, but it's we need to, for permitting reasons, show no rise. So when we're looking at a cross section like this, something we might have to move to as this design continues and we get further into modeling is cutting a little bank back or a little floodplain bench here as well, which could help with bank stability. This is actually a really poor cross section for that. Let me show one that's got a little, so something like this, a little more vertical on it. These are all exaggerated, so they look flatter. But basically, if you have this vertical bank, if we could lay back this bank farther behind the wood, so maybe if it's a really steep vertical bank, we could just lay it back at a 2-to-1 slope. So maybe it comes 5 feet back, 6 feet back. And then that gives us the conveyance we need that we don't show flood risk. So as part of putting these structures in, we may need to ask if people are okay if we can lay their bank back, which literally means taking that vertical bank and laying it back to, so like something like this, if we have this vertical bank here, maybe it goes back to a less of a steeper slope on that bank. So just maybe with that, would people have concerns with that? And I know it can be on an individual basis, but generally speaking, does that make sense? And any questions around that kind of flood risk and managing that?
Well, that one you just showed is ours.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, that there's so much erosion there and everything's changing season by season anyway. So if we can have something that helps with the salmon and also helps with erosion and bank strength, then we're all for it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And we obviously, the path is here in your trail going down, so we have that in mind too. But and any other concerns, questions around, anyone worried about what it would take to get these in, disturbance on their property, things like that? I just want to make sure we have these, good conversations now.
Hey, I have a question,
Yeah, please.
Johannes. Would it be safe to say that depending on the situation, that in these areas where you're able to maybe pull the bank back a little bit, put a large wood structure in there, that I guess, first of all, by having the bank laid back at a little bit of an angle, you're going to have less sediment potentially eroding and going in stream from a vertical bank, which is much more
Yes.
unstable, but also that the presence of, let's say, a root wad, that's actually going to disrupt these long stretches of high flow that are much more erosive because they have much more energy, and it'll serve to locally to slow the water down, which also could help minimize erosion.
Yes, 100%, Daniel. So thank you for saying that. So if we had, say this, I think this is Phil's property. So if we had this entire, there is erosion along this whole bank through here. So having maybe a wood structure here, another one down, well, like you basically want to make sure you have vegetation roughness or roughness from large wood, like Daniel said, to slow the near bank velocity. So the velocities along the bank are slowed, and you're really keeping the velocities farther off the toe of the bank. So that's why another reason why we like to see the wood extended as far out in the channel as possible, because you're really slowing the near bank and you're creating those higher velocities away towards more of the middle of the channel. Here with floodplain permitting, we're probably going to have to keep the root wads closer, but still it will keep those velocities away from the bank. But again, getting good woody vegetation and roughness in with these structures at a height that's high enough, so you don't just have all your roughness. Can you see my cursor actually? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So if your wood structures are just low and you're creating that pool scour, you can get scour up behind it. So having these existing roots here are great roughness, or if we got other woody vegetation, alders, willows, other things up along here too, as those flows rise up that bank, you're at all flows that you want to design for, you are keeping those velocities slow along the bank, if that kind of makes sense. So wood is definitely multi-beneficial, not just habitat, but also can help with bank stability.
I have a quick question about
Yeah, please.
the source of wood.
Yeah.
Are there possible trees in our area that could be harvested that are in danger of falling or diseased that could be used as opposed to bringing in large timber from a far distance?
Daniel, I don't know if you want to speak to this, but from what we saw out there, there were a few trees that were really leaning over the river, and that could be precarious. So it's, that for us, it's hard. If there weren't houses, of course, don't touch it, leave it, let it fall in. Knowing there's houses there, it'd be a property by property basis. Generally speaking, I think our approach is to kind of leave what's good. If there was a property owner who had a real reason of why they wanted to remove a few trees or something, then I think we'd be open to that, Daniel, but I don't want to misspeak. I don't know if you have a different philosophy on that.
I will say that it can be trickier to do something like that.
Yeah.
And a lot more logistics, a lot more risk, potentially more cost. Not to say that it's impossible to do that, but I would say it's more challenging to do that than to bring in wood. Because the other thing is, we may be putting in, I don't know what, 25 to 30 pieces of wood, something like that, maybe a little more. If we're trying to get wood from like all sorts of different sources, it ends up being a lot more expensive than if you have all the wood and you can bring it all in at one time. But we could look at it if there are some specific trees.
Mm-hmm. So then the other question I have is access to the creek. Would that end up coming down through individuals' properties, or would you try to do that through the parking lot?
We were going to go right through your property. No, I know. So no, I think Daniel, I don't mean to jump it, but ideally from the parking lot. Ideally, we'd have a stage and access from the parking lot. Depending how far downstream we're doing work, though, there are like getting machines down through there. Again, it's kind of, we don't want to disturb what we don't have to. So ideally, if there was a second access somewhere farther downstream that we get in, that would be great too. There are trees that are in the way of machines getting through. So we still have to figure out access a little bit. So, talking with you guys and seeing if there is more downstream landowners who have a nice access spot where we don't have to disturb much, that could be beneficial. But generally speaking, the parking lot area makes the most sense. Unless Daniel, sorry.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And that is certainly something we're going to be working with Portland Parks, the landowner on that.
Yeah.
They have a special permitting process. We'd be talking with them. Because we certainly want to protect the parking lot as well, you know, because there will be large machines going through it, excavators type of thing. And of course, as I understand, after talking to friends of Leach Garden, they like to use the parking lot in the summer for weddings. So we're going to really have to coordinate the timing of this pretty well.
Right. And my last question also has to do with timing. BES, and Chris, you might have a comment on this, is supposed to be doing studies and some early engineering for the Brookside wetlands area, which is, you know, west of 110th Street along Brookside. And they were supposed to be working on that by this year. It's been put off by a year now because of, you know, their own difficulties, but that's close to where you guys are trying to get down to, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, there's still maybe 250, 300 yards between the end of our project and and I think where BES is planning to work on Brookside. So we're definitely not getting near that area.
Yeah, that's true. They're still working on the design. There's some co-workers in my group. One other thing to keep in mind, there's a in-water work window that has to be adhered to, and that's for building projects in stream. I believe it's July 15th through August 31st for Johnson Creek. Is that
Correct.
so? There's a small time frame to do the work. So there will need to be coordination on that end as well.
Now I assume that they're build a cofferdam and then a tube the flow during the project, so the stream is not actually running.
Ideally, so I mean, unfortunately, Johnson Creek does get really low in summer, but it's also then a benefit for construction. So ideally, you're kind of curtaining off that area, that work area, so you're limiting the amount of turbidity that comes into the channel during construction at each site.
So Johannes, I mean, we don't have to get into this too much here because this is something that's going to come in later on in your design, but just wanted to let you know, when we did that project in Lower Johnson Creek, one of the things that we got permission to do through the permitting process was actually create these big isolation areas around each structure. So we didn't have to like move the stream or stop the stream. We just, it was like these huge pieces of really thick plastic put in place. So any kind of water construction inside of that created turbidity didn't mix with the main stream channel. And that process worked really well and was certainly a heck of a lot less expensive than what you might have to do in bigger projects. The project that Chris worked on was obviously a much larger project and they had more constraints, but I think we have some more options here.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, we've had to use silt curtains before, which are very expensive as part of that process. So that sounds good.
Johannes, Daniel, are you
Yes.
looking to do a risk assessment with this for structure, or how are you looking at that?
Daniel, I'm not, so for us, for large wood design, most of the risk and just entails making sure that you have the engineering safety a factor upon it. So if we did design everything to the 100-year event and you have your safety factor on that, so you have your 1.5, 2 in urban areas, you can kind of up your safety factor to really ensure that everything is ballasted properly. So your risk from the structure itself blowing out or something is minimized. So we've dealt with varying clients and varying levels of safety factors. So that's how we've kind of dealt with risk analysis. But I'm not sure, Daniel, on your previous projects, if you've had other types of risk analysis to go along with the wood structures.
Christian, I'm curious if you're referring to a specific formal process that you have to go through. We certainly, when we work with engineering companies on this, they have a number of things that they go through as professional engineers, because certainly their stamp goes on the design. And so, they have to assume some risk. So there are a number of things that that Johannes was talking about, but I'm just curious, is there like a specific process that you're thinking maybe your department goes through on some projects?
BES, we've been working on the Johnson Creek Oxbow project and then also the West Lentz project. And we've kind of gone through a risk assessment on those and just kind of looking at, if the structure fails or what if it recruits more wood and it forms channel spanning logs at that segment, like what's the potential risk of that to either upstream or downstream or the adjacent neighbors and things like that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Christian. And so I think generally speaking, we're well aware of with wood, no one's pulling wool over anyone's eyes. There is risk involved with putting wood in. Like you mentioned, if another tree falls in and it could rack up and create channel spanning jams. So I think picking those areas accordingly for decreased risk makes a lot of sense. And we're always kind of thinking through that in the design process. I don't know if we have a formal risk analysis besides the kind of engineering analyses we do with safety factors and all that, but beyond just kind of be cautious of where houses are close by. So like Dale's house, it's probably a place where we don't want to have a wood structure right in front since he's 15 feet away from the channel, but like things like that. So I think that's going through our mind throughout the whole design process. I don't know if there's a formality to it though necessarily.
There is another type of assessment. I'm not sure you'd really call it risk analysis, but because this is in an urban area with a very well-defined FEMA floodplain, during the permitting process, we will have to go through a specific process, working with some folks at the City of Portland Bureau of Development Services to get a permit where they look at some of these issues according to the location of the floodplain. And this is kind of relates back to the no rise issues that Johannes was talking about. So there is a level of extra scrutiny that's going to be taking place according to the permitting. And certainly there are quite a few permits we're going to have to go through on this process. So all those different agencies are looking at some of these issues, but I'm not aware of any like specific risk analysis process that we go through.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't know if that was incorporating kind of your design work and things like that. And just as you're looking at, like you said, Johannes, like the placement of each one of these structures and things like that.
100%. Even the offset structures right now, those might go away, right? So it kind of depends on the level of risk we want to accept as we go through the design process, and ultimately it is up to stamping engineer as well, right? He has the ultimate say on what's going to happen in this. So
did want to just check in on the time here.
Yeah,
we have one more question in the chat. Did want to get to that, but Johannes, I'm just wondering what else did you want to go over today?
I think for me, if there's at this point, we can send stuff out so you can see exact locations at this point. I think to move forward through the design process, we would definitely need, to understand for you guys how you're feeling about the project. If there's wood on your property, are you okay with that? What are you open to? So I think there needs to be some follow-up discussions after this, but generally we really just wanted to present this to you, answer your questions, make sure, there's anything that came up for you guys. So there's nothing really else. I could go into more, but I think at this point, I'd rather just open it up for people and see what else they have.
Okay. So before we finish up, and I do want to respect people's time since we are at 7 o'clock, I do want to just mention a couple things about where we go from here, what the process is. And then I do see Dale in the chat. You had a question, what about children on private property access during construction? Another one of those risk management questions, which we'll get to, but I just want to mention to folks, so this is the conceptual design meeting. And I think the fact that we're having all these questions is exactly what we wanted, because as you saw from the design that was presented, there wasn't a specific design. It was just, here are the kinds of structures we're doing. Here are some of the ecological issues. Here are some of the infrastructure issues. Here's how we would approach it. And the next step is that now that we have these questions, and I've been typing while we've been talking here, so I'm certainly going to send out to folks kind of some of the issues that have been raised here. But Johannes and Mark are going to go back and they're going to do the first level of actual design, which we call a 30% design. This is a design that certainly can have changes to it, but it's the first sort of thing that looks like an actual design. And once we have that, we will then go back to all of you. We will have another meeting and we'll say, hey, this is now what we're proposing. Here's how we've dealt with some of the questions that you've asked to date. What do you think? Are there other issues we need to talk to? And we're planning on having that meeting in about 6 weeks. So I just wanted to throw that out. I would ask, especially the folks that live along the stream that are here today, if you're still open to hosting a structure on your property, please let me know. And also, if you do not want to have a structure on your property, please let me know that as well. You know, as we move forward in design, as I was saying, it won't be set in stone really until we get much later in the process. But please get in touch with me in the next few weeks. I will be out of the office next week, but other than that, I will be in the office definitely through the end of June. So do want to hear from folks. That said, during the last part, we had someone join us, Timothy Cully. Timothy, I'm just wondering, are you one of the Streamside neighbors?
Yeah, I am. I just moved here probably back in December, and I'm about 2 houses down from the 122nd Avenue Bridge. But so I was just listening to see what other people's questions were. I didn't really come with any questions. I was kind of curious to hear what other neighbors were saying about all this. Yeah, as far as my particular house, it doesn't have a super high bank there or whatever. So I don't know if having what you guys want to put in is a positive thing for a low bank type situation or not. I don't know how that works, but I was just here more just to hear the information that's flying around right now. So as far as questions go, I'm still kind of working that out myself, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm over at 6651 if anybody has a Google map in front of them or something. So there you are.
Okay, well, thank you, Timothy. And I'm also recording this session. So if you or anyone else would like to review the video from this will be, I'll make it available to everybody. I'll get a link to you so you can take a look and listen to some of the questions. And
one quick final question. Did you have a projected hopeful timeline on when you'd be doing this project?
Good question, Sarah. We would hope to be doing this during the in-water work period, the late summer of 2024.
Thank you.
One quick question for you, Daniel. Are you happy with the representation of the people here on this meeting format? I don't know how many property owners or stakeholders are actually out there.
There are quite a few more than are here tonight. And Elizabeth, who's our project manager for this, although who just yesterday went on maternity leave. She will be back in about 10 weeks. But she's contacted a lot of people. In the last week, she's forwarded me quite a few emails. So there are definitely people who've gotten back to her, but not everybody was available to attend the meeting. So part of what I want to do is take all the emails that I have, and once I've typed up the issues and get it back to everyone. Although this may have to, you may not hear from me for a couple weeks because I'm not sure I'm going to get a chance to do it this week before I go on vacation next week, but I will get back to everyone. And, you know, I definitely want to get in touch with the folks who are along the stream who are not here tonight to get this information to them.
Kind of a follow-up to that. Would this be available on at JWC, Johnson Creek Watershed Council, or how can, if I've got neighbors who want to pick up on this conversation?
Yeah, I think probably what we'll do is we'll put this up on our YouTube channel, and we'll give everybody links to it so that you can just watch it through YouTube and keep it up there, you know, at least till we get the 30% design, then probably take it down again.
Great.
But yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
And Timothy would definitely maybe in a couple weeks like to get back with you and maybe just kind of talk through some of the issues that came up tonight with folks. Because I think based on what you had just said recently, I think, you know, there were a lot of questions about issues related to erosion or flooding or those kinds of things that we've really talked through quite a bit earlier on in the meeting today. So we can talk about that one-on-one if you would like.
That's fine. Sure. Yeah, I'm sure that's probably one of other questions I might have, but I also missed a lot of this meeting, but from what I've heard, it sounds like there's some good information out there already.
All right. Well, I think that's about it. But Dale, I don't want to ignore your question about children. You know, certainly we want to keep people out of the construction zone who are not part of the construction process. So that will definitely be something that we have to talk about.
Sure.
Seems like we have enough dogs in this reach. We can kind of get a little posse together and
I want to be first to recognize the great work and what the project stands for, and Pleasant Valley Neighborhood Association applauds of the work of Johnson Creek, and thank you very much, Daniel and crew, for getting along as quickly as you have. I find that quite amazing. Thank you, Johannes, for all that work.
of course, no worries. No, Mark and I were happy to do it. It's an exciting project, and I have to say this has been a great landowner meeting. You guys are really great. So I appreciate all the information and your willingness to listen to us babble on about wood and rivers for a while. So we appreciate it.
Well, thank you, everybody. And I put my email address in the chat if you would like to contact me. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. And I'm going to stop the recording now.